Back, President Jacob Zuma has appealed to builders and project managers to apply for the necessary protection measures to prevent construction accidents. His remarks follow the collapse of a house during construction at Meyersdal Eco Estate in Alberton. 7 workers were crushed to death. A government team of inspectors and engineers is investigating the site to determine what exactly led to the accident. Romicon, the construction company involved in renovating the house, said it will contribute to the funerals of those killed. Earlier reports quoted the Kuroleni municipal spokesman, Temba Khadebe, as saying plans for the extension of the house were not submitted to the council, deeming the construction illegal. Well, over and above the incident has also seen, or put the spotlight rather, on liability. Simon Coleman is the underwriting executive at Stalker Hutchinson Admiral. He joins us now from our Cape Town studio for more on the subject. Simon, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. Just looking at the importance of cover against tragic events like these, I guess the aim here would be to, one, ensure the responsible party can pay the claim, and the other, to ensure that parties who aren't liable can defend themselves. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely right, Devon, and thank you for having me on the show. I think what we're seeing in the insurance industry is certainly a tendency for smaller businesses, particularly in the construction sector, to seek out proper liability insurance. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's a huge amount of responsibility that still has to rest with the principal or the owner of the property. And I think that's where we're finding a lot of gaps still.
In terms of an accident where part of the building falls down, for example, in this case, and where there are tragic consequences, just who would be looked at in terms of liability? I understand there are many facets to this problem.
Yeah, I think, you know, and I mean, this is a terrible tragedy that's happened, but we just seem to be caught up in a cycle of these things happening over and over again. And if one looks at the employees, those that have been killed and injured, in terms of who's responsible for that, you know, the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Fund under the COID Act really takes care of injuries to employees whilst they're at work. One of the issues with the Act, of course, is that the benefits are capped. And going further than that, the employees' rights to actually sue their employers are extinguished by the legislation. So what this means is that when there's an accident like we've just seen, even if the employer is to blame, and I'm really not suggesting that that is the case here, but even if the employer is to blame, it's highly unlikely that those employees are going to be able to claim more than what's due to them under the COID fund. And this is really where things get interesting, because an attorney who's advising the families or the injured workers themselves may advise those employees to seek or to try and put the liability elsewhere in the supply chain while the building was being erected. And that could mean the property owner, it could mean the engineers that were involved in putting the slab together, it could mean the architect, project managers if those are on site. Yep. So all of those parties really need to have separate insurance policies to protect them and to make sure that when something goes wrong, that the funds are available to actually sort out the claims from those workers.
Right, so it's multiple parts of that chain that would have to seek cover. But I suppose for liability claims to be paid, one can't ignore the very significant issue of regulatory approval of any construction, which has to be there.
Definitely, and I think, you know, underlining all of this, of course, no insurance company is going to pay a claim if the proper regulations, or rather if the regulations haven't been adhered to. You know, insurance is definitely not there to remove anybody's obligation to follow the law. But if you put yourself for a second in the mind of the property owner, not in this particular case, but in any case, they may not be aware of the fact that the regulations haven't been complied with. Often, a project manager would be employed or an architect to take care of that. So, you know, again, it's easy to pass the buck on to another professional down the line, but ultimately it could be the property owner that bears the brunt of that. So complying, I think, ultimately rests with the owner.
All right, thanks very much indeed. That's where we're going to have to leave it. Simon Coleman, thanks indeed for your time.